So I am recording this session. Just started recording it. Just if you guys need some additional review, you could just message Mike to get the link of it. We'll try to cover as much as we can. We're going to focus on changes today. Okay? I know that we were talking about explanation of the RPA last week. We got through some math. I think we got through some disclosure stuff. But with these new changes, I want to make sure that we focus the next 2 hours on these changes that are going to be happening because they are going to affect your business. Okay? So we want to make sure that we take the time to listen to it. I'm going to suggest after you guys get the email from Mike, I really would love for you to really look at these changes on the contract. Okay? Now everything, like I said in the morning, any changes on the contract are going to be noted in a different color. In this case, you see this magenta color. Okay? So again, some of these are they're pretty self-explanatory because they're just clearing up the information that was in the previous one. But a lot of this stuff, some of this stuff is different and is new. For example, we're going to open up the new agreement that replaces the buyer-broker agreement today because we're going to be talking on that in the contract. Okay? So let's get rid of this. How many of you guys from the morning class or from the office meeting had any questions pertaining to what I talked to? Nobody? Okay, perfect. Then let's start from scratch. All right, so again, this is a new RPA. Now, mind you, you're going to see 2 RPAs in zip forms right now. Okay? I have this question, George, which one do I use? Always use the first one. Okay? They both look the same. They might have maybe something or a couple things different than the other, but always when you log in, you're always going to use the first one that pops up on your list. So if you go, let me open up zip forms so you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, so if I go to car.org, for you guys that don't know how to access zip forms, you go to car.org, click sign in. I do it this way, hit transactions, hit access now right there in that grid, type in my login and my password. It's going to validate my membership. Once it turns yellow, I click it again, and then it takes me into zip forms. All right. Okay, so now that we are in zip forms, let me open up my seller transaction. So now that I'm in the transaction, I'll go to my documents, right? I go to all forms. Your most important documents in zip forms are always going to be highlighted. It's going to be the first 3 that you see on that list. Cover page, residential listing agreement, and residential listing agreement, right? But if I type in California residential purchase agreement pops up as well. Okay? Some of my agents are getting confused at this stage, right? When they type in purchase, the California residential purchase agreement comes up, and then the residential purchase agreement pops up. Which one do we use, George? This one, the first one. So if you don't have anything selected in that search bar, it's always going to be in the top 3. Capiche? Okay, so that eliminates the confusion of which RPA we are going to use. Okay, so let's go back to the draft. Okay, so moving down, as you can see at the top, there is really nothing other than this thing changed because it's an update, right? The last one that the last updated one that we had was in December of 2021. Okay, this is actually December of what? 2022. So you see that within 1 year, less than 1 year time, they're changing the contract again. Right? So that's why it is so important that you guys keep up with these contracts and really focus on understanding. And how do you understand? You print it, you read it. Or you put it on one of your devices and you read it. Read it. You understand contracts, read them. That's the easiest way to do it. Right? If you don't understand something, bring it to the table. Bring it into class. Come see me in my office. I'm always happy to explain stuff that you guys don't understand. If I don't get it, I'll make a call. right? Because I'm just like you guys. Sometimes some of this verbiage is like, I don't understand it, right? It's like speaking to a friggin' Martian sometimes, but that's just the way these contracts are. Why? Because they're put together by attorneys, guys, right? And some of these, I'd say all of the attorneys that put these documents together have never worked the real estate field at all, right? So their understanding of one thing might be different, might have a different view than how you understand it, right? But this is where we come into play. Okay, so let's go to the first part. E1, loan amount. Buyer to pay up to blank points to obtain the rate above. What does this mean? Somebody share with me. What is the understanding behind it to your best knowledge?
Rate discount?
A rate discount, 100%. What does a rate discount mean? That the buyer is buying the rate down. Okay? In today's world or in today's market, where are interest rates? They're high, right? They're on the high side. So what are we teaching you guys to do whenever you're submitting a contract or an RPA? To ask for closing costs to do what? To buy the rate down, right? So depending on the buyer, depending on their situation, depending on their credit, depending on the lender, there's a lot of little things that play a big part in this. And having the opportunity to buy the rate down. Keep in mind that not every buyer qualifies for that buy down, right? You have to be in communication with who? The lender. Right? So you find out with the lender if there's a possibility for that buyer to buy the rate down, and as they buy the rate down, what does that do to their mortgage? It lowers it, right? So they're lowering the payment by buying a point, or I think a point is the maximum they can buy in a transaction, right? It could average anywhere between $5,000 all the way up to $15,000. Just depends on the lender and the client's situation. Every situation is different. Okay? So in this section, that's where you would put buyer to pay up to 1 point or whatever the information that the lender is giving you, points to obtain the rate above. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay? So this is absolutely new on the contract. Right? Because we are in a buyer's market where we are asking for money for a buy down, they're making it what? Contractual. Okay? Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Is this
Marisa.
something that we would collaborate with the financier on?
Correct.
So they can tell
100%.
Yeah.
Always remember this. The lender is the one in control. They're the puppet holder. Right? If there's no loan, there's no what? Purchase. Right? So in this situation or in any situation, in any transaction that's being financed, you and the lender have to be best friends.
Yeah.
Right? That's why it is so important that you have good relationships with the vendors that you're working with. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have no control over it because the buyer will come to us and they already talked to their lender or their bank or their credit union or whoever they're working with. Right? It's a matter of obtaining or establishing a relationship with that individual as well, right? It'll make your life totally easier than if you did it. E2, so that's E1. E2.
Question, George?
Go ahead.
So that where you only fill out the how many points if we're specifying,
If they're buying the rate.
if you're specifying the percentage in the previous line where it says not to exceed blank percentage.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, additional finance interest rate. Same thing, right? What would be an additional finance amount? Why would we use this part of the contract?
For what you were saying, if there's something funding the closing or the down payment, am I wrong?
You're wrong.
Okay.
Yes.
Like
Yes. I'm just gonna tell you straight up, you are.
Okay.
What kind of a purchase scenario requires more additional finance amount?
Down payment.
Down payment assistance?
Down payment assistance. Victor and Tanya got it right on the dot. You said down
And
payment.
then Cal Halfa.
So any loan structure that requires an assistance, right? Always remember that a down payment assistance program, if it's not a grant, it is a loan. Okay? Grants you don't have to pay back. Loans you do. So for example, the Cal HAFA program. The Cal HAFA program is 3 loans to buy a house, which is the main loan, right? Which is the loan amount here. We call it the senior loan. Then you would have typically what we call a junior loan, which would be the amount financed of what? The down payment. That's what's called a down payment assistance, right? And then you have a loan for the closing costs as well, right? Which the closing costs won't be on this thing because that has to do with the land. The closing costs. The majority of the closing costs is for what? Your impounds, right? Because whenever a buyer is buying a house, the lender's going to require for them to have prepaids. Because what is included in the payment?
Tax and insurance?
Taxes and insurance, right? So if Brandon buys a house, let's say in November, let's take it a bit, October. When are taxes due?
November.
November what?
No.
November 1st.
Oh, first.
When are they delinquent? December 10th, right? So if his taxes are coming up the following month and he's only made one payment, there's not enough money, right? From that one payment that he made. So the bank is going to require for you to make a prepaid, which is done through what? The closing cost of purchase of the house.
Hey, George.
Okay?
Sorry to interrupt, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Contracts question. So, sent over a contract on the 9th. They signed the 11th. It was delivered this morning. When does my 30 days start?
The moment that it was executed.
Today. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thanks.
You got it. Okay, see? Agent just came in and asked a question. Got his answer, he's on his way. Right? So, where were we at? I lost my frame of thought. Oh, the closing costs. So a lot of buyers will be like, why is closing costs so much? Well, you're buying a $500,000 house, right? And typically your closing cost is going to be anywhere between 1.5% all the way up to 3% of the face value of that contract. Okay? So if we're at a $500,000 purchase, worst case scenario, it'll be about 3% of that, which equals about what? $11,000, right? Why? Because you got to have prepays because your taxes are based on what? The assessed value of that property, right? So that's why all this closing money is extremely important. It's not that escrow is charging you $11,000 to do your paperwork. It's your bank. It's the buyer's bank. And they require money to be deposited in that escrow/impound account. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
And in the case of cash, there's still going to be quite a bit of money needed for closing, right?
What do you mean?
Well, if somebody's paying cash, there's still plenty of closing costs.
No, because there's no fees, there's no loan.
So there's no closing costs?
There is, of course, there's closing
Yeah,
costs, but it's not
it's not gonna be
in a cash scenario. There is no impounds required.
Right.
There's no loan.
Yeah.
But now the buyer is now responsible to make sure that they do what? They pay their taxes.
Right.
This is where people get in trouble. Right? This is where people get tax liens on their property because they don't owe anything. And since they don't have a payment, November 1st goes by, December 10 hits, and now they're delinquent. Right? Why? Because they forgot.
So in that scenario, when you have a cash buyer, as long as you're closing, for an example, as long as you close on October 31st, you don't have to pay anything for that escrow payment that tax payment that's come November 1st, right? As long as you close prior to that first. And if you close on the second,
It's going to get prorated.
They get a prorated.
Yeah, whatever. So the buyer is responsible from the moment that they stop being the seller is responsible for taxes on their property the moment that property changes title. And the new responsible person will be the buyer, right? So I'll take Brandon again and we'll go back to that scenario. If Brandon bought a house in October, well, what's the fiscal year? The fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th of the following year, okay? So if he bought a house in October and we closed in October, right? The seller was responsible from July 1st up to the point that he changed title on that property, right? And now Brandon is responsible from the moment that he takes over ownership till the following year. It's prorated, right? A seller's not gonna pay Brendan's taxes if he's not the owner of it anymore. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So that's how taxes are, and closing costs are evaluated, okay? So let's go to the next portion. G3, okay? Seller agrees to pay the obligation of the buyer to compensate the buyer's broker under a separate agreement. Form SPBB attached. Seller broker's office, if any, to compensate buyer's broker is unaffected unless otherwise agreed. Okay? As I was saying in the class this morning, I tell you guys, especially my mentees, when you're working with a buyer, what's your job? To put them under contract, right? What is that? What was that contract previously? The buyer broker agreement, or better known as the BRE. And in that BRE, there is a commission statement, right? That specifies how much commission you're going to make representing this buyer, right? So if you show that buyer, I mean, you're not going to do it without explaining this to your buyer, obviously, right? But if you say, I make 3%, and the buyer chooses to purchase a house that's paying a 2.5% commission, then that buyer is liable to pay you the rest. Right? So let's do some math so you guys understand what the heck I'm talking about. Okay? Let's say that you're making 3%. That's what your agreed contract says with your buyer. You have a house that's $500,000. Okay? The MLS is disclosing that they're going to be paying 2.5% times 2.5% commission. The commission that the seller is offering, or better yet, the broker, the listing broker is offering at this point is $12,500. But what is the difference? 500,000 times 0.5. In this case, the buyer would owe you $2,500. That $2,500 amount would be part of their closing costs. So they would have to attach $2,500 on top of what their fees are already, to make sure that you get the agreed upon percentage that you have in your contract. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay?
How was that happening before?
Same way.
It
Same way.
just
Now-
didn't have the nice little box.
It was an additional you would have put it in your BRE, but now it's contractually placed on the actual RPA. But in the RPA, instead of the buyer paying for it, you're asking the seller to agree, as it says on the contract.
But you didn't see that very often in the contract.
100%. Not every agent does that. For the people that are going to do this, it's going to be the seasoned agents, right? The Thomas Velasquez, John Silva, the Chapman team, the Chapel team, the seasoned agents that have a lot of experience in this. That's why I'm teaching you guys this, so that you guys can start doing this yourselves, right? So the seller agrees to pay the obligation of the buyer. Who did you sign the BRE with? Or the agreement from the buyer to the broker? With the buyer. It says here, the obligation of the buyer. So the buyer it's his obligation to do what? Pay you this $2,500 difference, right? But on the contract, we're asking the seller to cover this. Essentially pushing your commission up to the 3% that you have agreed with your buyer.
So George, so if you sign that broker buyer agreement with the buyer, and you specify, let's say 3% or 2.5%, whatever you specify.
Sure.
You as the buying agent, would that be your, decision when you're looking for properties for them, to only go to the ones that you see that are going to pay you the max commission that you agreed with?
It's going to be at your discretion. You know what I
Because if
mean?
not,
But
they
if
just
you
have to
find a
compensate.
property, if your client is looking for a specific property with specific amenities, and that property is only paying 2.5% or 2%, or whatever the case might be, and you know for a fact that that's going to be the property that your buyer's going to want and possibly get that thing into escrow, are you going to pass up on it?
No.
Of course not.
You're just going to make them pay.
You're going to make a business decision, right? Always remember, you have the obligation to perform the highest fiduciary duty to your client,
Right.
right? So if that means that you gotta show a property that pays less commission, you gotta show a property that your buyer is entitled to see.
And then you, as like you said, you can then go back and say, hey, I'll adjust it to the 2% because, or whatever, or you can force them to pay the difference.
Right.
Got it.
I mean, as long as you have it in writing. Always remember, if it's not in writing, then what? It doesn't exist, right? So everything in this business, you want to make it what? Contractual. You want to make it contractual. Hey, you agreed to it. Here's the contract, right? That way, there's no questions. But obviously, in order for you to get that contract, you got to make sure that you what? You sit down with your client and you explain how you work. That's exactly what John Silva does, right? That's why the buyer, what do they call it? The meeting that you're going to do with your buyer,
Consultation.
the consultation. Your buyer consultation, that's why it's so important, right? To bring them in, and you guys, so you guys can do what? Set expectations. Because there has to be expectations from the agent, and there also has to be expectations from the buyer. And vice versa with the selling side, with the listing side, right? In order for me to be able to perform, Mariana, I need you to perform your end of the bargain. Obviously, you're not gonna be like, you're gonna explain the value behind that,
Right.
right? So very important. Go ahead, Daniela.
So basically, you specify that on your buyer's consultation, you specify this is the percentage. And here, when you write a contract, here is where you just check the box, or you rewrite it here too. Is there a spot to write here too?
To write what again?
The percentage that you expect to take.
So you would have to attach the SPB. You can't do it on the actual RPA. That's why the moment that you check, screw it up. The moment that you check this box, the system is going to automatically add this document here, just like any other field. Okay. Now, mind you, there are bugs on this thing still, so be patient. They will get fixed. Okay? I've already noticed it, and I've already brought it up to the committee that is in charge of this, right? So if you run into a situation, oh, this is not working, be patient. It's okay. There's nothing wrong. It's going to get fixed, right? That's just the way things happen as things are changing, right? It's not perfect, right? There are bugs. I'm just going to be completely clear about that, right? As a matter of fact, our previous broker, Josh, actually sits on that committee. And I was with him yesterday because I taught a class at his office, and I said, hey, by the way, this is wrong. And he took notes, and he's like, okay, I got to bring this up so we can fix it, right? So it's a good thing that we have a connection and we have a relationship with Josh because he sits on that committee to be able to get these things done, or at least taking a note of, right? Okay, so because the SPB is on here, let's go see what the SPB is.
Yeah.
SPB. There it is. All right, seller payment to buyer's broker. Who is the one that pays you your commission?
Selling side.
The broker. Your broker. Right? The advertised commission on the MLS goes to who? It goes to the broker. Right? And for you, in order to get a check from your broker has to do what? Authorize it. How does that broker authorize it? What is one thing that you have to create in your file when you're in escrow, in command? A CDA. A CDA. Commission Disbursement Authorization. Right? So when the CDA is ordered through your command file, right, your opportunity, you enter the details of that transaction. It is now submitted to who? Compliance. Right? Who's our compliance officer? Angie. If you haven't met her, she sits right outside my office, right? You go as it's submitted to Angie. Angie reviews your documentation. She reviews your contract. She reviews your commission agreement if there is one, right? You guys heard of the commission agreement, right? Commission agreement is a document that you use to charge your principal, who is the principal? Your client, right? The $199 fee that we have as an office, or any additional fees that are going to be incurred, such as like a TC fee, right? And then if there's a commission agreement on there, she takes a note of that and adds it to the CDA. If it's not, then that means that you are going to be paying for any additional fees out of your pocket as the agent. Okay? Once everything is reviewed, she issues the CDA, emails you a copy, and then emails the prospective company of escrow that is on this file a copy of it. So by the time that you close escrow, the checks that are sent out are already sent out according to that CDA. If that CDA wasn't in that file, then that escrow company would send the broker a bulk check, and then the broker would have to cut you a check. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the way it works. Okay, so seller payment to buyer's broker, car form SPBB 1222. This is gonna be the date that it was created, so December of the year 22nd, right? Let's read it. The following terms and conditions are already incorporated in and made part of the purchase agreement by default. Okay? But if I wanted to do this, other, right? Then I would name what other document I would be incorporating it into. In this case, let's say the RLA. What does RLA stand for?
Residential listing agreement?
Correct, the residential listing agreement. How do you know when a package is an agreement? I asked this question earlier.
When it starts off with the agency?
Correct. Whenever you see a package in zip forms that starts with an agency, that's going to be an agreement between the agent and the principal. Okay? Okay, so by default, it's being incorporated and made part of the RPA, the purchase agreement. On property known as, in this case I put the office, right? In which Tony Smith, referred to as a buyer, and whoever blank the seller is, referred to as a seller. Notice, the amount or rate of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. Are commissions negotiable? 100%. 100%. What is going to be the final commission? Whatever you guys agree upon with the principal. Right? Whatever you agree upon with your client is the commission that you're going to get paid. So in this case, if you're working with your buyer and your buyer agrees to pay the difference to allow you to make a full 3%, that's what you guys contractually agreed to. Okay? So it's not fixed. Right? Last year, I had a family member of mine that had a house in Las Vegas that she wanted to sell. Right? Obviously, I'm not licensed in Vegas. But I do have a whole bunch of people that I trust in Vegas that are agents, especially KW agents. One of them was a really good friend of mine, right? But my family member wanted me to be involved in the contract. I was sending this referral to my friend Maria at a 25% referral fee, right? But then my cousin said, well, I really want you to help me with this thing because I don't know what I'm doing. I said, look, Maria's an experienced agent. Yeah, but I trust you. And I'm like, okay. So I said, that means I can't make 25%. I got to make more. Right? I'm not being involved in transaction or trying to step on Maria's toes. I'm just being on the buyer's side as the client. Right? But I'm making a referral. So I upped it to 50%. So I called Maria and I said, hey, are you okay making a 50-50 split on a listing referral that I have? She's like, absolutely. I said, okay, then I'm going to give you my cousin's information. You're going to charge her 7% and explain why. Right? And my cousin agreed to it. So the point I'm trying to make is that just because we say 6% doesn't mean that that's where it stops. Again, commissions are negotiable. In this case, we explain the value behind it. We increase the commission by one point on that percentage, and we charged her 7% listing commission. And she was okay with that, right? As long as everybody agrees to it, things can happen, right? And what is the definition of a contract? Right? It's an agreement between two parties to do or not to do something. That's exactly the definition of what it is. I've explained this many times. I could take this mouse pad, not notepad, right? Mouse pad right here. And I could literally write up some terms between me and Brandon, right? Brandon has a house, he's a fiscal. I could take this, or I could take a napkin at Starbucks, write up some terms. He signs it, I sign it, and I could take that agreement and open escrow. It's an agreement between two parties to do or not to do something. That's exactly what a contract is. Any questions so far? Any questions online? Okay. Number one, buyer has entered into a written agreement to compensate buyer's broker. Whatever difference of compensation you're going to have. Right? So if you agree that you make 3% and they're paying 2.5%, then we're going to put 0.5% here of the purchase price, or if checked, a flat fee. Okay? So if it's, let's say, well, if they agree to pay me an extra $1,000, $1,000, that stays blank. Okay? But it's easier for you to do the percentage, because if it's a higher priced property, you might be losing money. Right? So we always just specify the percentage. So in this case, we're asking the seller to cover that difference to get us to that 3% or whatever percent you guys are going to be charging your buyer. Right? As of the date, this seller payment for buyer's broker document is signed by buyer, and pursuant to the MLS or blank, seller's broker agreed to pay buyer's broker blank percentage of the purchase price, or if checked, a flat fee upon completion of this transaction. Right? Number three, seller agrees to pay the buyer's broker, because again, who pays you the commission?
Broker.
The broker. And the client belongs to who?
Broker.
The broker. Right? So the buyer's broker. A blank percentage of the purchase price, or if checked, a flat fee. Insert a percentage or an amount which is no greater than the applicable percentage or amount in paragraph number one, less the applicable percentage or amount in paragraph number two. Okay? So it's literally just putting it in layman's terms that the seller is going to be paying you the difference if they agree to it. Okay? Buyer authorizes escrow holder upon request to deliver to seller a copy of the portion of the written agreement between buyer and buyer's broker, identifying the amount of compensation buyer has agreed to pay buyer's broker. What does this mean? That you're agreeing that the seller is entitled to receive a copy of the agreement that you have with the buyer for the difference in that commission. Right? Because what if you're just making it up? Right? Go ahead.
I've been looking for that and I can't find it. I'm calling it the wrong thing probably.
What are you looking for?
I was looking for, I can only find it under, is it buyer representation and broker compensation?
Correct, that was a buyer broker agreement, the BRE no longer exists, there's a new one.
Okay,
I'll get into it, I'll bring those up in a minute.
Right on.
Yeah. There's actually 3 of them.
Okay.
Okay. Number 5, if buyer's broker is the same as the seller's broker, then the amount specified in the MLS shall apply in the manner specified in paragraph number 2 and 3. Additionally, if the broker has agreed in a listed agreement to reduce amounts of compensation in the event of a dual agency, the amount of the compensation specified in the MLS will still apply to offset the compensation that the buyer has agreed to pay the broker. This is in the event that you're doing what? A dual agency. Okay? You're representing both sides of the transaction. By signing below, buyer and seller shall acknowledge that they have read, understand, accept, and have received a copy of this seller payment for buyer's broker. Did you guys understand this document? It's pretty simple.
And this is only utilized when the seller is paying that difference.
Correct.
Got it.
Because if the seller is not, then you already have an agreement with your buyer that they're gonna cover the difference.
And then, okay.
That's if you're gonna be using it. It's not mandatory. But if you are, then this is a document that you're gonna have to provide. You're gonna have to provide a copy of the agreement between you and the buyer.
In what circumstances do you need to use this?
Like if you have an agreement where you're stipulating to your buyer that you're set at a certain commission.
Yeah. And
Okay.
if there's a loan, right? I mean, if there's
No.
a loan, no?
Has nothing to do with the loan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just to recap a little bit, so this is for the seller to pay the difference, or is you letting know the seller that the buyer is gonna pay the difference?
No, it's for the seller to pay the difference. Look at the title of the document.
Right,
Seller payment to buyer's broker.
okay.
This is
So let's
just,
say they, on the MLS, they say, we give 2% to the buyer's
Mhm.
agent, but you send this to them and you ask for an additional 5%.
or whatever, yeah. I mean, 5% is a lot.
That's what we,
I like your thinking, Daniela.
A lot to you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oops,
And remember, I'm your
that's a
mentor, so you split it with me, all right?
okay.
Yeah, so exactly. But you have to have a buyer and broker agreement in place.
Okay, George, I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Tanya.
So for some reason, I did also, write that the buyer pays the rest of the commission. So is the seller that's paying that additional, or to bring?
Correct, that's exactly what, this is exactly what that is for. That's as long as you are, let me go back to the draft, checking this box.
Right.
If nothing is, if you're not gonna ask for a difference, if nothing is gonna change, you don't do anything. You just write it up as you would do any other RPA. But
Okay, so
if
who's
you-
actually paying the difference, the seller or the buyer?
The seller.
What does that say?
That's the seller.
Seller.
Right, that's what I thought, but for some reason I wrote down buyer, I just heard someone else say buyer, so I thought maybe that we.
Well, the agreement, the initial agreement is between you and the buyer. But when you're submitting the offer, you're asking the seller to cover what you're telling your buyer to pay.
And then if your seller says no, you go back to the buyer.
Then the buyer is responsible for that.
And say,
Yes.
If he wants to move forward.
Correct. Always, everything in real estate is negotiable. Always keep that in mind. Everything in real estate is negotiable as long as everybody agrees to it.
This is just like a concession for the
Correct,
sellers.
100%. And when I say everybody agrees to it, who am I talking about?
The two
buyer,
parties,
seller,
Who are the two parties?
buyer,
What
seller.
did you say, Lisa?
broker.
Buyer and seller. Right? Because the transaction is between buyer and seller, not broker and broker. Right? Not broker and broker. The commissions that are paid out by who?
Seller.
The broker. The broker's the one offering the commission. I've already charged the seller. I'm charging you this much in my listed agreement. Then I'm gonna advertise that I'm gonna pay out to whoever brings the buyer this much. Who's offering that? The broker is, not the seller. The seller's paying the listing broker, the broker is paying the buyer's broker, and then the buyer's broker is paying the agent. Did I confuse anybody?
No.
You sure?
Keep going. Between buyer and seller.
It's like you're playing poker. I'm just kidding. All right. Okay. So let's go back now to the art. Okay. Now that we're in here. Here it is. So now, what did I say? What made an agreement?
Disclosure. The agency disclosure.
Correct. So as you can see, this packet right here starts with what? The agency. So this is an agreement, okay? So let's scroll down, and your agreements are always gonna have your fair housing, your FHDA, it's gonna have your WFA, and it's gonna have your possible representation of more than one buyer and seller, always. Okay? So now this is what replaces the BRE. Okay? This is the BRBC now. Take a note of this. BRBC is going to be the new document that you're going to be using to put your buyers under contract. It looks exactly the same, just a different name.
Why did they change the name?
Some hotshot attorney in up north thought it was a good idea, so I don't know. So we don't have control over what they
Do
do.
you have to add this extra on here?
I teach you guys as mentees to always put your clients under contract, regardless whether it's a buyer or a seller. This is what you would use now. Go ahead. Ernest.
So I have a question. So, let's say like, we make the buyer sign this, right? And then like, let's say the next day.
You're not making the buyer sign it. You're
Well,
agreeing
yeah.
with the buyer to sign it.
But then
You can't force anybody to do
Yeah.
anything they don't
But then
want.
they change like the form again. Do you have to? Does the previous one still hold, or you have to sign this one now? Like if it changed like tomorrow.
What do you mean if it changes?
Like you know how before it was the BRA. Let's say we signed the BRA.
No, it doesn't, it does, if you have an agreed contract, right? If last month I signed a BRE with my client and I have dates on it, which this is gonna be valid from this date to that date, it expires when it expires. Just because there's a new document doesn't mean that that goes obsolete, no. It's an established contract. Yeah, that doesn't go away, okay? Somebody else had their hand up. No? Andy, you got a question? No? Victor?
Yeah, I just have a comment to clarify this. So you have an agreement with the buyer, right? Say,
Sure.
I'm gonna, regardless of what listing I may show you, I want 3%.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that the buyer likes offers only 2%.
Correct.
So, at that moment you have the buyer sign the SPVD and send it to the listing site.
Correct.
Okay.
Asking them to
that's when
pay.
you specify the difference.
The difference. So
Okay,
you
so-
you hear on letter A, buyer agrees to pay broker as follows. 3% of the acquisition price and whatever additional fees you're gonna charge. For example, the $199 in this case. But you would have to add the commission agreement as well, right? So the buyer agrees that 3% is what we're gonna be making on this thing. But you know what, Mr. Buyer? It's okay because there is a commission being offered on the MLS. But if it's only 2.5%, I want to show you why I make 3. So in this case, you would be liable, you would be responsible to pay me 0.5%, right? But let me show you the value behind my work ethic. And that's how you represent. That's how John Silver does it.
So it
Right.
doesn't explicitly say that they'll pay the difference. You just explain that to
It's
them.
already in here because you're telling them that they're gonna pay you a full 3%. If whatever commission is being advertised, if there's a difference, then they owe you automatically. There's an agreement, right? They've agreed to the terms. So again, this thing is exactly like the BRE, they just changed the name of it. Now, if you're not gonna be charging anything, and you're just gonna depend on what the MLS says that you're gonna get paid, then you don't have to do anything here. All you're gonna do is fill out the top part to put them under contract as you being their agent.
Oh, so you just leave that blank.
Correct.
And this is where you will enter the 199, correct?
You could enter 199 here,
On number 2, on
Yeah.
4,
yeah,
2.
but you still have to add the commission agreement. Go ahead.
What would you advise us to do in that situation?
What do you mean? Advise
As
to
of
do?
right now, would you just have us go off of whatever they're offering the seller, or?
If you want to make your life easy, whatever is it being advertised on the MLS.
Okay.
Once you start building experience and you are building a rapport that you are the person to work for, then you set your standard, right? You set your standard. Go ahead, Daniela.
So this is basically, you have a buyer's consultation and you, after the buyer's consultation,
Right.
you send this document to create an agency,
Correct. Correct. To create an agreement.
an agreement.
Yes.
Okay. You
And
don't
yes,
know
you're
yet.
creating you're establishing the agency because it's the first document that's in this packet.
Okay, but you don't know yet what the property they're gonna buy.
So that's a great question. So this is the way I fill it out, okay? So it says, property to be acquired, location, Antelope Valley, and surrounding areas,
Okay.
okay? Or Los Angeles
Come.
and Kern County. Why am I including Kern?
Because it's.
Because there might be a house in Rosemont, and Rosemont is what? Kern County.
Yeah.
And that automatically covers you. Cities, you can leave that blank. Price range, $1 to $1 million.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Big amount.
I like that.
It might be a big amount, but for example, I went and showed a property to my brother this weekend, right? It's $639,000. I know, I would have never thought my brother would have bought a house that expensive. But he fell in love with it. And he did everything possible to go get pre-qualified, and they approved it. And he calls me today, let's move forward. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, you're gonna have a $3,200, like $3,200 as a mortgage payment. He's like, I don't care, I want the house. I said, okay, you never know, right? Because the last house that I sold him, he paid $310,000 for it. Now he's doubling his purchase amount 3 years later, right? So you never know if they're pre-qualified for. I mean, if they want to stay at $500,000, but they find the right house and it's 7, they're more than likely going to make that $700,000 purchase because they want the house. So you want to make sure that you specify if you're going to put them under that agreement that you don't cap them out at the amount that they want to purchase because they might be able to afford a higher priced house. Go ahead.
Which brings me to the question of, so does that mean if you find a house for 1.1, this agreement is not valid?
Mm-hmm.
It is. So of course, depending.
It's not.
It's not valid.
Correct.
Right. So then.
But you're going to know from the get-go how much your client is going to afford.
Right.
Right?
So then you just cover your bases. Of course, if you're doing something in the valley, then of course
Right.
it's going to up that.
100%.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And again, I guess by same thing with the location. If you happen to find something outside of that location specified,
Same
it
thing.
doesn't. Okay.
Yeah. Same
Gotcha.
thing. Okay. So now you guys know what what replaces the BRE. Okay? Let's go, I'm sorry. So it is now, make a note of it, the BRBC, Buyer Representation and Broker Compensation Agreement. And this is between the buyer and the broker. And then obviously yourself, the agent. Any other questions on
So you
this?
can leave the price range blank also?
Yes, absolutely.
What about date? Do you fill out the date?
Yes, I give it a year's time. Absolutely. I do a year's time, from starting today to a year from today.
where does the date go?
Right here,
On,
beginning date, and then you do 365 days.
okay.
And like you said, you can leave all this blank then, because you don't have to put any information to protect yourself.
But, yeah, exactly, but if you want to be a professional, then you fill it out so that you can explain it to your client.
Got it.
Right? Always remember, you always want to explain. I'm not telling you to explain these documents in detail because you'll be there sitting there for 3 days. Right? But you briefly explain what these documents are, you give a copy to your client, allow them to do their due diligence by reading the contract themselves or the agreement themselves, and then they can come back to you if they have any questions.
And what,
Go ahead.
and what if they don't want to sign that form too?
Then that's gonna be between you guys. You can't force clients to do what they don't wanna do, right? But if you present enough value, they're gonna sign. They're gonna sign, right? It's all gonna depend on the agent, right? Why should I sign with you, Brandon? Well, let me show you why, right? And then you present why you are the agent that you are, right? So whenever I do a listing presentation, I bring my listing presentation and everything I do, I show them that I'm a top producing, award-winning agent, right? I actually bring my numbers from the MLS so they could see my production, right? I want them to see the value in what George can do. Now, for a lot of new agents, well, what production do I have?
Office.
Exactly. You're part of the #1 brokerage in the Antelope Valley. The numbers that the office has, guess what? Those are your numbers too! Yes! So guess what? You are in production. Because you're part of our team. You're part of our family. So if they want to see numbers, take the office numbers. You're not lying. You are part of you're part of the organization. This is what we do. This is what we do. Right? And that makes a world of difference. Right? Because again, you're trying to bring value. You're trying to see why should I as a seller choose Brendan or Ariana or vice versa? Right? Who is the best agent for the job? I was going to say the best man, but I take that back, right? Who's the best agent for the job? Right? And will you compete with other agents in your office? Of course you will. I've competed with agents in my office all the time. Right? Of course. It's who brings the best value that's going to take the job. Make sense? Okay.
Are you gonna go down the rest of it?
No, because I've done this multiple times, yeah.
Where does the 199 go? The 199.
So you would put here. But I would, like I said, you gotta include the commission agreement when you're working with the buyer. On the listing side, you could just put it in your listing contract, right? But when you're working with your buyer, you have to include the commission. How many of you guys have seen the commission agreement? Called the CA. 199. Right there.
Commission agreement, that's something you
Because-
present to
To your buyer. And
To
then
the
you
buyer.
submit it to compliance. Yes. Always remember that any fees that you as the agent are charging your client, they become commissions. According to the Department of Real Estate, it is a commission and it's not a fee.
Okay, so if you want to put that into charge to after your buyer's consultation, you send that buyer agency agreement, and then along with this one. Because
Correct. If you're gonna charge the 199, absolutely.
So you put it in two different places, you put it here and also in the compensation agreement?
Yeah. If you're gonna be using the agreement, yes.
Before listing, it can go right on the RLA.
Correct.
And you're good there, okay.
It's
This is
right in
for
the middle
buyer.
of the first page. Yep. Okay, let's go back to the RPA, the new one. Okay, so we've covered this part right here. Let's go to the next red one. L4, L5, L6, L7, they added the word delivery. It used to say only after acceptance. They've added after delivery also, right? So 17 days or blank days after acceptance or 5 days after delivery, whichever is later, right? So for example, if I deliver the disclosures on day, by default it's 17 days. I deliver disclosures on day 15, right? I'm literally past my 7-day period that is specified here. So because I'm past that 5-day period, I mean that 7-day period, this is saying that I would have to give them an additional 5 days after delivery of those documents. Right? So now, on day 17, because you delivered day, they don't have to ask you for an extension. Because the contract is automatically, by default, giving them an additional 5 days on that contingency. This is good.
Yeah.
Right? This is really good. But as a proactive agent, what do I tell you guys?
To send the reminders or the time frames,
Well, you send your disclosures on what?
day one.
On day 0. The moment that you accept the offer, you send your disclosures, right? What does that mean? That you better make sure that if you want to send them on that day, you have your disclosures ready. When do you get those done? At the listing appointment. You take your package, Mr. Seller, I'm gonna come by and pick these up in about 3 days. I just want to make sure that we have everything ready, so when we do get into escrow, we have everything ready for the buyer, right? Being proactive, guys. You don't want to wait 7 days as it says here. Why? Because you're trying to even the playing field, right? If you get an offer accepted and you take 7 days to deliver these documents and the buyer has a 17-day contingency period, essentially how many days is left?
10.
10 days.
So if you get the disclosures at the time you get the listing, the disclosures have no buyer's name.
Correct.
So
That's
you
fine.
submit them without the buyer's.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
So in this case, George, we was talk about this for the last, few months, that they would have those 10 days because you're giving them to them so late. But now with this new addendum or whatever off the delivery, that means if you do provide on the 7th day, they technically would have another 15?
No, because you're within the contingency period of this contract. As long as
Okay, so
they
they
do it
still have
below,
just the 10.
as long as they do it below the 7 days, as long as the seller delivers under that 7 day, that 17 days
It's still-
stays.
still-
But if I deliver on day number 8,
Oh, okay, that's when you get the extra 5.
Correct.
So it's just 5 days from that point.
from the delivery date additionally, right? So, but if it's going past that 17-day period,
Right, because in that scenario, if you deliver it on day 8, 5 days is still under 17, so it doesn't matter.
correct, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
But if it's
so-
pushing it past the 17-day period, it automatically gives them additional 5 days
To the buyer.
to the buyer.
a
So
little-
I delivered,
I'm sorry, real quick, give me the example of when you would get an additional 5 days after
I
17.
deliver on day, let's say I deliver on day 12.
Okay, got it.
If I deliver on day 12, it's gonna push them past that 17 days, right? Or day 13, something to that extent, right?
Okay,
You
yeah,
gotta
day
be within
13.
yeah, you gotta do it within the contingency period for this to take effect.
Because you said on the 13th day if I deliver,
It goes
then.
Correct.
It goes to 18.
Yeah, because it's 5 days
Yep.
after that.
It pushed
Okay.
it past the 17 days.
I got you. So no matter what, they have the 5 days, so as long as they're within the 17, they're good, but if you deliver it where it goes outside 17, they're always allowed that 5. That's
Correct,
basically what it is.
100%.
I got it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, next part, M3. Occupied units by tenants or anyone other than seller. Tenant occupied addendum, the TOPA. Okay, how many of you guys have heard of the TOPA?
Not a lot of us.
TOPA stands for Tenant Occupied Property Addendum. Seller shall disclose to buyer, I'm reading this part right here, the additional terms. Seller shall disclose to buyer if occupied by tenants or persons other than the seller, and attach a TOPA in the counteroffer if not part of the buyer's offer. Let's go to M3, okay? Actually, no, it was a different number. Where is it? It's 487. It's 487A. Okay, right here. Property addendum, right? The new one is going to be the mixed use purchase addendum, MUPA. But why is it declaring it there? 4A. Bless you.
Thank you.
Let's open that document up. MUPA. So some of this stuff I'm learning just like you guys are. MUPA. Okay, I know what this is. Okay, so the MUPA, what is it? What is the main purpose in a transaction? Is to what? Disclose, 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 right? What does mixed use mean? That means that your property could be zoned residential and commercial as well, right? Because you could have a residential living quarters, which makes that part residential zone. And then it could be a big lot, and half of the lot could be zone commercial because you're running a business, right? So it's a mixed use. So if you run into a property that has this, even though it's going to be disclosed in the preliminary title report, you have to make it contractual now. Okay, it's a disclosure, right? You're disclosing this, and then it is established with this addendum. Okay. But why is it declaring it in that portion on, so it says 4A, what was the other number?
I think it's supposed to be the top at the top.
7A. Yeah, it's right here, the TOPA, but it's not highlighted. So let's do 7A and see what it says. Okay, here it is. Occupancy. If buyer intends to occupy as a primary or secondary residence, see paragraph E3, which is, we were just there, and unless otherwise agreed, such as in car form, TOPA or TOPA, the unit buyer intends to occupy, I remember, shall be vacant at the time of possession, is delivered to buyer. And 2, if the buyer contains more than 1 unit, within 3 days after acceptance, buyer shall give seller written notice of which unit buyer intends to occupy. Okay, so we're talking about a multi-unit now, okay? Ariana is my client, I'm the agent, right? Brandon is the seller. We visit the property, I'm her agent, and I say, Ariana, which unit do you want to occupy? Because she's buying it as an owner-occupied property, even though it's multi-unit. How many units does FHA allow you to buy on 4 units, right? That's why in most of these documents, you'll always see 1 to 4 units. Why? Because as an owner-occupied property, FHA will allow you to buy a 4-unit building as long as you make one what? Your primary residence, right? In this new statement, Ariana, my client, has to indicate to the seller, Brandon, which unit she intends to occupy. Because according to this, it says, where is it? If buyer intends to occupy as primary or secondary residence, and unless otherwise agreed, such as in car TOPA, form TOPA, the unit buyer intends to occupy shall be vacant. Right? So it's making it a contractual that Brandon has to make sure that the unit that she is specifying to Brandon is vacant by the time we close escrow. It is now contractual.
Okay, so before, if there are tenants,
You would have to serve them. You have to serve them regardless, right? How many days does a tenant get before they have?
29 or
If it's under a year tenancy, it's 30 days. What if it's over a year? 60. Okay? And you have to give them the time allowed. Now, if that tenant has additional time on a contract, if it's in a contract, then that contract has to be respected.
So George, so if they've been in this building or the residence for more than 2 years, it's a 60-day notice?
Mm-hmm.
So that's from the time escrow closes?
From the time they sign their contract.
Okay, so if I'm the seller, I have tenants there that's been there for 2 years, as soon as I sign to
As soon as you sign that listed agreement, then it begins from there.
From the
It doesn't
listing
have to be an escrow.
Yeah, from the listing agreement.
Right. If Ariana is my tenant and I decide that I want to sell the property,
Right.
my agent is going to go serve that tenant with a 60-day notice from that moment that I signed that contract, the listing contract.
Is that mandatory?
Yes, 100%.
Oh, God.
It is 100% mandatory.
Because they need to be out, and if they're not out by those 60
Well,
days.
they don't have, if it's a multi-unit, that doesn't mean that they're gonna move out. You're just giving them notice that they might have to,
oh.
Right.
right? So in essence, you might be selling the multi-unit with tenants in place,
Right.
right? But if you need to vacate the property, I mean, you're gonna let them know, hey, because they have to be notified that there's gonna be a change in ownership.
Right, so if it's a single-family resident, you sign the listing, you give them that 60-day, and let's say the home goes on the market, at the end of that 60-day, those tenants don't vacate at that particular point.
It's your responsibility to get that thing vacated.
So it's yeah, at that point, I can't really sell it, I can't do
It's
anything. I would have
contractual,
to
it's
go
on
and
the
evict them.
contract now, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so that gives the buyer, that gives Ariana the contingency to pull out. Because you haven't fulfilled what the contractual agreement is.
Okay, so it protects, got it.
It protects
On the
the buyer.
seller side, they just gotta evict or do whatever, but with that
Correct.
side, because if I put the property up and on day one, she makes an offer, I'm gonna provide her the information that says I served the tenant, so she knows to accept this, she has to wait for those 60 days anyway.
100%.
And if they don't get out, then that she can walk
Yep.
away, continue, got it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Always remember, what do I specify about the RPA? The RPA is in favor of who?
The buyer.
The buyer. 85 to 90% of that contract is in favor of the buyer. What is the seller's responsibility in the RPA?
To make the buyer perform.
Correct. To enforce the contract upon the agreed terms that you guys went into, right? So if Ariana says, I'm going to remove my contingencies in 17 days, my job as a seller is to enforce that agreement, right? How do I enforce it? How do I enforce somebody to remove contingencies? You obviously being proactive, I'm gonna send her a buyer to perform on day what? 15.
15.
Why, Ramses?
It takes 48 hours for it to go into
It
place.
gives you 2 days, right? The buyer to perform takes 2 days to go into effect.
But you also run the chance of them canceling on you. They have the right to cancel.
Oh, of course.
So and you lose the
So, the way on every of my deals, day 15, the buyer's agent is gonna get a buyer to perform. But here's the thing, I let him know. I said, hey Brandon, just to let you know, this is the way I work, because we have a contractual agreement, would you agree that we all want to be held accountable to the contractual time, right? Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So do not be alarmed, Brandon. On day 15, I'm by the way I work, customary, on day 15, I will send you a buyer to perform. Don't be alarmed. It's not a big deal. It's just to hold everybody contractual accountable to the dates that we're agreeing on, okay? So don't be surprised. You will get an email from my assistant on day 15 for a buyer to perform so that we can remove the contingencies on day 17, okay?
Sounds
Great.
good.
I let him know. I do that on every contract. Every contract. And what happens on day 17? Contingencies get removed. Yes. Yes. Go ahead, Daniela.
So you said on day 15, after the offer was approved, you mean on day 15 from what day?
Escrow.
From escrow, okay.
In escrow.
And you send
You
that?
can't send it. You can't send documentation for somebody in it if you don't have an escrow open.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my question is to perform what? You know what I mean?
Whatever contingency is due.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever contingency is due. What contingencies are due on day 17? Pretty much all of them.
So
What are those?
The
What are those
loan,
contingencies?
contingency.
Let's go back up.
Investigation,
Property, loan,
Yeah.
disclosures.
Right here.
Yeah.
Loan contingency, which means what?
loan approved.
Correct. Loan approval. Appraisal contingency, which means what? That the value has been done. The appraisal inspection has been performed. Right? Investigation of property is what?
Inspection,
Inspection.
termite.
Right? No, that falls under a different area. Right? Review of seller documents. What is that?
Disclosure.
Disclosures. Or any additional documents that are involved in that. Right? Preliminary title report. Right? What is that? The report, the title report that we know as the prelim comes from who? The title insurance company that was selected on the contract, right? Common interest disclosures would apply to what?
The HOA.
It would apply to anywhere where you're sharing any common interest, such as a condominium complex. What would be a shared interest?
A wall.
A what?
A party wall? A wall?
A wall? The wall in between the two units? That would be a common interest. What else?
Swimming pool.
A swimming pool, the walkway, the parking structure, anything that you guys use together, right? Those would be common interest. There has to be disclosures for that as well when you enter into that, right? Review of leased or liened items. Solar. We now have a solar disclosure. We're gonna go over it, right? What other things can be liened on a property?
Right now, I'm dealing with a roof.
A roof being liened?
A
Or,
roof?
I mean, no, not a roof, sorry. Well, that's a lien on the property because they paid for a roof, but also,
So it's a mechanic's lien.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, these are leased items, right?
Alarm systems.
Alarm systems is a big one. Also, what is it, Ceci?
Propane tank.
Propane can be a leased item, right? Water softeners can be a leased item. Solar panels, solar chargers for electric cars, that could be a leased item. Anything that does not belong to you, what does lease mean? You're renting, right? You're renting the item. And in most cases, for example, solar, well, the seller's not gonna be able to relocate that solar system to another house. So it has to remain on the property, and what does the buyer have to do?
Take over.
Assume it, just like Andy said, right? Assume the lease unless the buyer is willing to do what? Pay off that lease and allow the buyer to receive it free and clear, right? Depending on the value of that house, for example, I represented my brother in a house in Bakersfield. He had a solar system on there that he was buying, not leasing. He owed $9 grand on it. I told him, let's add $9 grand to the listing price, right? Because it'll still appraise. Let's pay it off through escrow and let's advertise it that way, right? Seller, free power on this house. Don't pay an electric bill. Solar system fully paid off, right? We ended up getting multiple offers on that thing. It was a marketing structure for us, right? And because it got into a bidding war, he made more than enough money to pay the system off. We don't have to worry about anything, right? Because the buyer's getting a free system, right? Essentially, because they overbid, they're paying for it. Go ahead,
It's
Lizette.
a lease on the solar, then is that harder to?
Most of the leases, on solar are pretty much like a buy to or a lease to own, right? When that lease is completed, the system is yours, right? They just word it differently, right? But essentially, you want to review the contract for the lease company. Because if there is still a substantial amount of money owed on that lease, then like Andy said, the buyer would have to assume it. Now, in that situation, you need to make sure that the lender is aware of this, because it might affect their DTI. What is DTI? Debt to income ratio, which means how much money they make versus how much money they owe and how much money is left over to do what? To make a mortgage payment.
Because that's gonna be required.
100%.
Right.
Some lenders might say, oh, we don't care, right? But for the most part, they will, because they might have to increase the amount of qualification that they need. And if they're maxed out on their DTI, it's not gonna work. Because it's creating more debt. Does that make sense? Right? So all these things, guys, is the things that you need to do to make you the type of agent that we need in today's market, which is what? A skill set agent, right? A skill set agent versus the type of agents that we have 6 months. No offense to anybody, but we didn't have good agents 6 months ago. We just had agents that the market made them look like they were good. Am I lying? I'm not. Because I always say this as a joke, but you would put a tent in the middle of the desert and you were going to get multiple offers on that freaking thing. I'm not kidding, right? The market was nuts. And because of so much low inventory, buyers were willing to freaking do it. Right? I mean, Brandon, for you guys that don't know Brandon, he sits right here in the corner office. I remember he had one listing, he had 42 offers. What? On that one, I was like, what? 42 offers. And guess what? By law, he has to present them. You know how much work that is? That's insane. That's the type of market that we were in. Today's market is a whole different ballgame. Go ahead, Daniela.
Can the seller refuse to watch it? Any more offers?
Yes, absolutely, as long as you disclose it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Victor?
On the solar issue that we were just discussing, does the lender review the applicant's potential utility bills?
No. No, because that's not considered a debt.
Okay.
It's not considered a debt. It's what's gonna affect your credit. Go ahead.
I have a question. How do you remove the contingencies?
In writing.
In writing?
Yes. So when you that's a good question. When you're ready to remove contingencies, you would put together the contingency removal, the CR. It's already let go. Where is it? Right there. Contingency removal, what the heck did I do? Number one, why would we want to number these? Because you might have multiple contingency removals, right? You might specify in the contract, right, that you're gonna remove your contingency on the disclosures within 10 days and keep everything different, right? So your first contingency removal is due within the first 10 days. that means that you're gonna remove, where is it? Loan appraisal, interior investigation,
All except.
review, oh, right here. Review of seller documents. Okay, and that's all you're removing. You're keeping everything else in place. And then 17 days comes around, and now you put contingency, removal number 2, and then you remove the rest of whatever you're gonna be removing. Right?
Wait, the question was that you will send them a notice to perform, and then you remove a contingency that it was done? That was the question, or who removes the
Buyer does.
contingency and when?
The buyer does. When are you removing? Whenever the contract says they're due.
And who do you send that to?
The seller,
So,
So every time something has been done, you just send this
100%.
removal?
Yep,
Da-da-da-da.
yep. On day 17, by default, you gotta remove everything, according to this contract.
or the seller at that point could walk if they do.
Well, if you don't remove it, you're in breach.
Right.
Okay, so why would you send them a notice to perform on day 15
To hold them accountable.
if they didn't do any of this? Can they?
Oh, they have to do it.
Okay, just,
They have to do it. I mean, if you send, it's gonna be the seller's agent responsibility to do what? Enforce the contract. So you need to make sure that the appraisal got ordered, right? You gotta make sure that you delivered the disclosures. You gotta make sure that they delivered the preliminary title report to them. You gotta make sure that the NHC has been delivered. You gotta make sure that escrow did their job in delivering what? Their escrow packages, right? So just because the RPA is in favor of the buyer doesn't mean that the selling agent, the listing agent doesn't have responsibilities. Again, it is your job to enforce it.
okay, so
Right?
this is when in this 17 days, you would just be on top of like with the lender and with the buyer to see.
Not on 17 days, from day one.
Right,
Yeah.
within the 17 days.
Correct.
This is your
Yeah.
staying on top.
So let me, an offer gets accepted, right? We open escrow. Today is day 0, right? How many days does the lender have to meet with that buyer to sign the loan disclosures?
17.
3 days. Okay? So within those 3 days, the lender has to meet with that buyer to disclose what? How much the loan is gonna cost, what the taxes are, their payment, everything that has to do with that loan. They have to advise them, Mr. Buyer, this is how much this is gonna cost you. If the buyer agrees, he signs off on it. That's the loan disclosure. When they sign that loan disclosure, it opens up the door for the lender to order the appraisal. Because now the buyer has agreed to the terms of the loan, right? If Ariana's my lender and she hasn't told me how much the fees are gonna be, how are you gonna force me to pay for an appraisal? Because the buyer pays for the appraisal. I wanna see if this is gonna make sense before I spend $500. Make sense? Right? Go ahead, Victor.
Is the loan disclosure the same as the good faith estimate or different?
Could be, yes, but again, the good faith estimate is what? An
An
estimate,
estimate.
right? The loan disclosure actually specifies real numbers. This is what your payment is going to be.
Okay, that's the actual
Yes.
numbers.
Yes,
So you send an offer and it gets accepted, then of course you would notify the lender. And then,
Immediately.
and then at that point, if you're the buyer's agent, then you just gotta stay on the lender to make sure they get with their buyer within those 3 days.
and the seller needs to too.
Right, seller's listing agent or.
Yeah, I hold lenders on the buyers that are making offers on my properties, on my listings, I hold them accountable 100%. I want updates.
Right,
100%.
because you need to order that appraisal.
Yeah,
I
because
guess,
you wanna
within
make
those 3
sure
days.
that they're gonna be removing everything on day 17.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'll put myself in the buyer's agent's shoes, right? If Daniela's the listing agent and she's gonna hold me accountable to remove or have my client remove this contingency on day 17, I wanna make sure that the lender's doing his job. Right? Especially if me and Daniela have a relationship, I don't wanna look like a dummy in front of her. I was gonna say something else, right? You know, or be recorded. Gotta keep it PG. You know what I mean? But, so I gotta make sure that the lender's doing his job to make sure that we're on track to close within the agreed date that I'm specifying right here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So again, it falls back to the question that Daniela said, who's gonna, the buyer. The buyer has to do it, but how do you hold them accountable? The agents have to. Right? It is our primary responsibility to make sure that everybody's doing what they need to be doing. Right? And here's the thing. Are there good agents?
Yes.
Are there great agents?
Yes.
Are there horrible agents?
Yes.
Same thing falls on the lender. Are there good lenders? Yeah. Are there great lenders? Heck yes. Are there horrible lenders? Oh my God, yes. Yes. Right? And the lending portion of a transaction is extremely important because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are ultimately in control. Because if there's no loan, there's what? There's no purchase. And if the lender's not doing their job, it's gonna screw everything up. Right? Go ahead, Daniela.
So is there anything to give them something to perform?
The lender?
Yeah.
No, but you can hit the buyer with a performance that will affect because the performance on the buyer affects everything on their side. Everything on their side, including the lender. Because if you're telling them, hey, buyer to perform to remove loan contingency, who's responsible for the loan? The lender, right? So now the buyer's agent needs to go to the lender and be like, Mr. Lender, they just gave us a buyer to perform because you haven't given us loan approval.
But without that loan approval, you can't like actually move anywhere.
100%.
So that's the first thing to
100%. That's why it is so important to work with the right lender. The right lender will will make your deal, or the wrong lender will break your deal. I mean, I can speak for experience. I know Andy can because he's a seasoned agent. I know Annabelle can speak for it because she's a seasoned agent. We've all experienced bad lenders in this business. Have you not, Annabelle?
Yes.
And it is tough, right? We actually, she's still online? Yeah. Ashley got, fortunately, unfortunately, I tell her this. She got to experience a bad lender, right? On her first deal. But I'm actually glad that I actually had that opportunity because now she gets to experience the good and the bad of this business. Hopefully the next deal that she gets, it's going to be completely different than the one that we had. And it's just, look, there's no reason for a lender to do what they're doing. I mean, we're all on the same team regardless of who you're representing. If Lisa is representing the buyer and I'm representing the seller, guess what? We're on the same team, girlfriend. Right? Why? Because we have one goal, and that's to close escrow so her buyer can get a house and my seller can get some money. Right? And as agents, we want to get paid.
That's right.
So it is extremely important that we work together. Right? Try to find solutions. Don't put anything under the rug. It's going to be found. I'm better off telling you, Annabelle, you know what? We ran into a situation with my buyer. This is what's going on. I just wanted to make you aware. Annabelle's going to appreciate that. Because now she has the opportunity to go deliver that information to her seller. And if being Annabelle, knowing that Annabelle is a seasoned agent, I guarantee you that Annabelle prepared her client for anything that could possibly go wrong. Right? And because she did that, it's going to be easy for Annabelle to deliver the bad news of what's going on. Not that it doesn't have a solution, because everything has a solution in this business. You just got to find it. Right? Just got to work together with the other side. Because here's the thing. The reason why I tell people don't put anything under the rug, because if Lisa has a problem with her client and she comes to me and she tells me, I might have experienced it already. I said, hey, we fix it like this. And that might be the solution for us to get over this hump and keep moving on. Does that make sense? So these things are very important in these transactions, especially when you have contracts that are binding. And now with the new changes, everything, I mean, there's new stuff that has to be included. Do you guys have any questions? Go ahead.
Quick one. If it's cash in L1 and 2, do you check the no loan contingency and no appraisal
Correct.
contingency boxes?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey George, also too, and maybe off track, but where do you go into like to put in like not off market deals, but like seller financing and that type of thing?
Great question. So if you go to the top, on page 1, right, you're gonna put amount, right? How much money you're gonna finance? This amount, seller financing, boom, right there, right? And by clicking that box, it adds the seller financing disclosure. Okay, so let me, perfect question. I'm actually just about to write up a contract this way.
Thank you.
Okay? It's my own listing, I'm double ending both sides, the buyer's coming in with it's a mobile home.
Right.
$120,000 purchase, buyer's coming in with 100,000 cash, the seller's gonna carry 20, okay? Let me go over to my,
And this would be the same too if you're taking over payments.
correct.
Got it.
Seller financing addendum. Okay, or let me go back to the RPA. So in my RPA, $120,000 purchase, $5,000 deposit, loan amount $20,000, seller financing, for a total purchase price of 120. So 95 plus 5 equals what? 100. So that means he's coming in with 100 cash, right? So because the seller is financing it, I now created a seller financing addendum and disclosure, right? So the information, principal, interest, payment, maturity terms. The seller said, hey, tell him to pay me $500, 0 interest until he pays me off 20 grand. Perfect. Buyer agreed. So I put principal amount 20,000 per annum, payable at approximately $500 a month. Remaining principal balance due 3.3 years. 3 years, 3 months. Because this is a seller finance, I put a stipulation under number 17, other credit terms, conditions, and addendum. Seller will remain as the legal owner until buyer pays off $20,000. Because the seller is remaining as the legal owner, buyer becomes the registered owner. So now they're both untitled.
How will that work with the park?
It's the same thing as if a bank. So,
he's a tenant.
great question. If in this case the seller is becoming the bank, right? So if you have Santiago, for example, okay? Santiago would be the legal owner of the structure, and the person that is responsible for the loan is the registered owner. It's the same scenario, different source of money.
And they
It's
go
the same
on
thing.
title as
It doesn't
registered
change.
owner.
And it's registered with HUD, right? With both of them, one being the legal owner, one being the registered owner. So in the event that this guy stops making payments on this $20,000, the legal owner could come and foreclose on him.
Got it. And what if this was different, where if it was an assumable situation where the current seller had a loan that new person.
That's a different addendum, but
It's a different-
assumptions, it's like a needle in a haystack in today's market. You really don't do them.
Got it.
It makes no sense. Most banks, 99.9% of banks don't even have that available anymore.
Right. Okay.
Right? Back in 2008, after the market crashed, it was big.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: every market creates different options for people, right? Now, if they wanted to assume a property, then they would have to refinance it, create a new loan. Go ahead, Juan.
How would that $100,000 loan affect the actual owner?
What do you mean?
If he were to repossess the home, or if he were to foreclose on him?
It wouldn't. The buyer would lose it. It's like you
So
buy it.
they
It's
wouldn't
like
be able
you.
to put a lien on the mobile home.
There is no lien. He's registered as one of the owners of the property. It's legally registered with the Department of HUD, right? So it's the same thing when you buy a house. You go through a conventional loan, right? You're buying a $300,000 house. Conventional, 20% down. What's 20% on 300,000? That's 90 grand. Okay? You put 90 grand out of your pocket. You're making your monthly payments. A couple of years go by, you stop making payments. The bank said, time to go, buddy. Foreclosed. Is the bank going to give you your 90 back? No. Absolutely not. You lost it. You're the one that defaulted, not the bank. It's the same thing here. If this guy defaults, he's saying bye-bye to his 100 grand.
But they wouldn't be able to put a lien on the actual owner's property?
No, of course not.
Okay.
It's like, how would you be able to put a lien on another bank's property? No. In this case, the buyer is becoming the bank. He's the one financing it.
So this only works then when the homes are paid off?
Correct.
Because when they have an existing
100%,
loan, it
yeah.
goes.
Property
into
has to be
what I was
paid
talking
off.
about. Right, got it.
Yep.
And
It's
in that case,
it's an
when
owner
it's
carry.
paid off, that guy is out of it, right? Like the seller would not have any more, they're gonna change the title in that case?
It's gonna, it's gonna change
They're both on
regardless.
the title right now, and then when the buyer paid off that, then there's gonna be a new title.
Correct, it's gonna be, what is the word that we learned in real estate school? To give back, what is the word that is used in real estate?
To what?
To reconvey.
Oh,
Okay? That means I'm giving you back. Okay? All right, let's go back to the RPA.
One more quick
Go ahead.
question. How did you land on the 3.3 years? Why did you pick that?
I divided 20,000 over time, I divided 20,000 by 12, and it gave me a final number, 3.3.
Did he-
3 years, 3 months.
Did you determine the amount that he pays every month, or did he?
The buyer, the seller gave me the amount.
Okay,
I asked him, how much money do you want as a payment? He said, $500 a month. I said, okay. Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay. Damn, we've been in here for over an hour and a half.
Yes.
Time goes by quick when you're learning, huh? I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, loan contingencies used to be 21 days. So
Thank you.
The loan contingency used to be
Right.
21 days. But here's the thing,
When
guys.
did it change though?
Last year, last December, the previous update.
Thank you, because I closed, in December I closed, and I knew I was fighting over that.
So here's the thing, guys. You go to the RPA. Now, mind you, I said everything's negotiable, right? So if you feel like your lender can't do 21 days, 17 days, then you put 21 there. Now you got 21 days, as long as the seller accepts it.
Sense.
Yeah. So we just did, who did we do? Oh, with Daniela, right? We just submitted an offer on a property that is under construction, right? It's not finished yet, right? And we set a 45-day escrow, and we extended the contingencies to how many days? 30, right?
No, we extended to 45.
The escrow, we did 45, but the contingency period, we put 30 days.
It's
right?
17, yeah.
Yes, because here's the thing. What if the property's not completed within 17 days?
all right.
Right? We need more time. I'm not gonna go do an inspection on a property that's not finished.
Yeah, we did 30.
We can perform an appraisal on a property that's not finished. Right? So we extended the contingency period to 30 days because they said the property would be done within 30, right? We asked for a 45-day escrow, and that way it gives us, the buying side, enough time to perform these items as they state that the property is going to be constructed, right? But we also put a stipulation. If property is not complete within 30 days, contingencies and close of escrow will be extended automatically. Right? So that there's no hiccup.
Where would you put that at?
In other terms on the
In other
RPA.
terms? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you specify the length of time that a contingency and escrow will be extended by?
No, we just said that the extension would be granted because we don't know how much time we're gonna need. But at least we're putting it in a stipulation where all parties are agreeing that if that happens, it's already contractually agreed upon that Daniela's client will have extra time, and we're not gonna run into a situation, well, what do you want extra time for? Because it happens all the time. Right?
What if, George, what if you weren't proactive and you didn't think about that and you kept 17 days and the property was not finished in 17 days and the seller.
You need to go talk to your mentor.
But the seller, could the seller force you to perform, or could it stay in the contract, or they would more than likely, they just have
Here's
the
the
right to
thing,
either stay in or walk away?
here's the thing, you're not gonna submit a contract that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate truth. Because here's the thing, if Daniela, once she gets to the point where she's a seasoned, experienced agent, she's gonna know what to do based on what she's learning.
Right.
Right? So it's just, I mean, I understand your question, but it really doesn't make sense.
Right.
I'm not gonna submit an offer to put in my client in a situation where she's gonna be in trouble.
Right.
What's your job? To protect your client at the highest fiduciary level that you can.
Right.
All right? So I get it, but again, and we were on that contract for a while, huh, Daniela? We're just right there, just like taking our time how to word it correctly. Right? And once we kept changing, okay, let's do it, right? We keep going back and forth until it read correctly. That way it's very clear of what we're offering so that we can get the seller to accept the terms.
They even complimented clean contract when she received it. She's like, nice.
And the nail's like this.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's inside her head, she's like, oh my God, George, thank you. Hey, my job is to make you guys look like top guns, man. Right? That's ultimately what I want, because I want you guys to establish good relationships out in the field, because the relationships will make your business. Right? It will definitely help you. And now with this experience with Daniela, when she experiences another new construction, she's gonna be like, oh, I'm an expert in this stuff. Right? I got you, girlfriend.
Told her if you guys have any more.
Right. So let's go back to the draft. Okay. We got 20 minutes. All right, where were we? Okay, we got that done. Again, they added the word delivery here. We talked about this one, right? This one is extremely important because as listing agents, we want to do what? We want to look good with our vendors. We want to give them business, right? Because our vendors are part of our team, right? And as an agent, you want to have a group of vendors that are going to back you up. So for example, I've been in the business for 13 years or something like that. I still work with the same lender since day one. I still work with the same title company since day one, which is Fidelity. I work with Jim Kirk. Me and Jim Kirk are like this, right? Home inspector, I probably had no more than 3 over the years, right? The last guy, the guy that I work with, I've been working with him for the past 5 years, right? I work with Old Republic. I have been since the beginning of my career. That's my go-to company of choice, right? I work with on-track escrow. Unless the seller wants to specify somebody else, I do have an investor that he has a relationship with Pacific Trust. That's who we use for his, right? I tried over and over and over again to get him to come and use on-track, and I just, no, bro. I said, I'm good with Pacific. That's my people. They're part of his team, right? I'm part of his team, right? So you want to build long-term relationships with the people that you're going to be working with. The last thing you want to be doing is like, oh, I'm going to use this one, this guy, and on this contract I'm going to use this one, and on this one it creates too much of a mess. Find one that works for you and stick with them. If that's Monarch, keep using Frank, right? If that's on-track escrow, keep using on-track. Because here's the thing, with him, with Pacific Trust, he has a corporation, right? Every time we open up, as a matter of fact, I opened up another escrow with his properties at PT yesterday. They don't ask me anything. They already have everything on file. They have his articles of incorporation. They have everything, right? So it makes it easy, right? It makes it easy. The same way that you establish the way you work, right? With these vendors, they already know how to do stuff. Not only that, I had a house in Roseman that I represented a buyer on. The sewer line, or the house got full of sewage. There's a big root in the sewer line. It was on the sidewalk, right? And the home warranty company did not want to cover the repair. So I had to call my rep, right? At that time, it was Jessica Simpson. She was our rep out here for Old Republic. And I said, Jessica, you need to make this right. She's like, they don't want to fix it because it's outside of the property. I said, no, you got to keep in mind that according to real estate law, the buyer or the owner owns all the way to the middle of the street. So what does that tell you? It's on their property, regardless if it's on the sidewalk or not, right? They own all the way to half of the street. Did you guys know that?
No.
No?
Yeah.
Did you know that, Andy?
Yeah, I just learned it in August.
My real estate students from my real estate school know this crap because I teach it, all right? So whenever you have get it ready. You have KB Homes, comes, they buy a big piece of land, right? This big piece of land has parcels. These are the property lines. Are we on the same page?
Yes.
Right? Each one of these parcels has a different APN. 13405 2020. Right? And now this one is 2021, 2022, and so on and so on. Okay? That's the way APNs work. KB Homes comes and talks to all these people and say, hey, we want to buy your lot. Great. They buy every single one of them. Property lines right here. Vacant land. KB Home creates a plan and separates these lots by creating an easement. A public easement that you guys drive on every single day, which is called what?
A street.
A street. So they dig into this property, and they take a portion of this property. And now the street is created. The property line follows in the middle of the street. Right? The sewer line goes in the middle of the street. These houses connect on the main sewer line in the middle of the street. Before this neighborhood was made, the property line is right here, not right here. So theoretically, this person owns all the way to the sewer line, right? That's why when people say, you can't park in front of my house, I own it. Yeah, you do, but it's a public easement. It's a public easement, which means that anybody can use it regardless of who owns it. Right? So, going back to that example in Rosemont, here's the sidewalk. The blockage was right here. I took this to the warranty company and I said, no, you're wrong. My client owns all the way to the middle of the street, which means that they're covered. When I made this when I brought this to the table, guess what happened? They fixed it. Wow. They were like, you're right. They were trying to pull a fast one on me. Oh, George doesn't know this, right? I'm an experienced agent, guys. Right? That's why it's so important to become a skill set agent. Right? That's why it's so important for you to know these little details. Because if I wouldn't have known, they wouldn't have done anything. Right? Because of that situation, Old Republic created sewer coverage because of my situation. Now every home warranty in town offers it. I wasn't the one that created it.
Nice.
You're welcome.
For at least you're charging more.
Yeah. Well, the seller, if you're going to tell the seller to pay for it, crap. Here's the thing. When you're representing a buyer and you're choosing a home warranty package, choose the biggest one. Always.
When do you choose that?
At the time that you're submitting the RPA. But the time you and I submit it, you're going to choose the biggest package with Old Republic is $750. You put $750 right here. Why do you want to max it out?
To all protection.
Because if the seller says no, we'll give them $600. If you would have asked for $450, you probably could have gotten more if you opened your mouth. So always ask for the max. Always, because the worst thing is that they could say is no. but more than likely, they're probably gonna agree to it. Right? Go ahead.
What do you put in, where it says home warranty plan chosen by buyer, what do you put underneath there?
Upgrade it.
Upgrade?
Upgrade it with additional coverage that I want, right? So let's go to car. So let's go to that part on the actual contract, right here. So home warranty plan chosen by buyer. Coverage includes but not limited, upgraded plan with sewer coverage. Is that fit?
Is that on all homes or just non-septic, obviously?
On all homes.
Oh.
On all homes. Do all homes have a sewer? 100%. Right? Regardless of what type of sewer it is. It could be a septic, it could be a cesspool, it could be a public, not a septic system, a drain system, whatever the case might be, you want the coverage. Go ahead, Daniela.
Is that coverage for how long?
1 year. 1 year from the close of escrow.
Okay.
Yes.
And after that, then the buyer just,
The buyer has the option to renew it at the current value of that price. Because this price right here is an introductory price that the warranty companies do for your clients, right? At the time of renewal, this coverage might be more expensive. Is it smart to renew it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is, 100%. I've had home warranty on my house since I bought it. Never stopped paying for it.
oh, you can renew it.
Every year, right? Because you never know when things happen, right? I had a, give me a second, Daniela. I had a client that we closed 3 months after we closed, all her pool equipment took a crap. We have pool coverage, right? It was a $5,000 pool filter replacement. It would have been $5,000 out of her pocket because the home insurance wouldn't have covered it, right? She paid $75, which was a deductible. So is it worth it? Yes, it is. Right? And these packages cover, the biggest one will cover even your fridge, your stove, your washer, your dryer.
Your oven?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Have you seen what the price of a new fridge is? It's like buying a freaking used car. It's like, what? $3,200 for a fridge? Well, what does it do? Does it cook too? You know, it's nuts. I couldn't believe it. I was out shopping for a new fridge the other day. I'm like, oh crap, I'll keep mine. Forget it.
Hey George, would you specify pool for, you know, in your example, would you specify pool right here?
Yes.
Because
So sewer, let's say upgraded plan with sewer coverage and pool and spa.
And AC is implied.
And AC is already included in that package. Oh. Yeah. Go ahead, Daniela.
Where do we find that package? So,
You can just call Old Republic and they'll send you a brochure, or there's brochures right by the mailboxes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we can send that
Yeah.
to the
Or you can call
buyer.
Stacy. You have Stacy's number. Do you? I gave it to you, right?
No.
Okay. If you guys, whoever doesn't have Stacy's number, so Old Republic is our preferred home warranty company. Okay, they're one of our preferred vendors. Our rep for Old Republic is Stacy Fournier. Her number, let me give you Stacy's number, and you can call her and introduce yourself. Tell her I gave you the number. You want to learn a little bit more about home warranty. You always want to go to the source, right? Stacy Fournier, 661-810-5446.
Sorry,
Here,
can
let me
you
put
say
it right
that?
here so you guys can see. Stacy Fournier, 661-810-5446. That's our information. Right there on the screen.
Do they go out to Kern County also?
I can
Yeah.
see.
Yep, absolutely.
Did you write it?
Okay.
And this new change is now the buyer selects this. Before it used to be the
Correct.
seller could pick the company.
Correct. So going back, home warranty plan chosen by buyer, right? We always argued this part. As a matter of fact, when Josh became our broker, he would always say, why is the seller entitled to choose a home warranty company? Well, the seller's paying for it. Who cares? Right? Why? It's because this part right here is a declaration of cost, not a declaration of provider. Right? That's why they made it clear to allow the buyer to choose whatever provider they want to work with. Because they might be coming from selling another house. And they might have, again, a relationship with somebody that's been providing home warranty services for them for the past 5 years, let's say. And they want to keep that rep as the rep on the new house. So now they have the opportunity of doing that. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so on those boxes, when you choose who's paying for it,
The
right?
seller.
Buyer,
Is it
seller.
always the seller?
Yeah.
Oh, the seller pays for the home warranty?
Yeah.
So who's going to pay for it is who you contractually agree to.
Oh.
It doesn't matter who it is. But what is your job as the buyer's agent? To negotiate the best possible deal for your buyer. So you, in essence, what are you going to do in essence? Ask for the seller to pay for as much as possible. In this case, you're going to ask the seller to pay for the home warranty. Right? Can they agree or disagree? Yes. Right? I could ask for a $750 warranty plan and they could come back. We'll pay for the warranty plan, but we're maxing it out at $500.
Oh.
But the buyer says, well, I want the $750. Well, now the buyer will pay the difference. Right? But the buyer says, no, I'll pay for my own plan. The buyer will cover it. It's whoever chooses to pay. Right? It's not set in stone. It's whatever terms are included at the time that you create that contract or that offer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we got 5 minutes. Okay, we talked about this already. Retention of deposit. Before adding and regarding possible liability remedies if buyer fails to deliver deposit. Okay, so in other words, it's saying regarding possible liability remedies if buyer fails to deliver deposit. So Ariana makes an offer, she gets it accepted. How long does she have to make a deposit into escrow?
3 days.
3 days. What if Ariana doesn't make a deposit? What happens to Ariana?
Out of contract.
She's out of contract, she breached it, right? Can the seller come after her? No. What is the seller gonna come after her for what? Nothing was performed.
I'll just drop it.
Exactly, right? They'll just cancel it, right? So there's really no such line. Now let's say that we're 12 days into it. There's inspections, there's this, there's that, the seller did this, the seller did that. And then Ariana decides to disappear. Can the seller come after her then? Absolutely. Now we have enough time to create a dispute for what? Liquidated damages. Right? And where do the liquidated damages get recovered from?
The deposit.
The deposit. Okay? The deposit. So if there is no deposit in escrow, there is nothing to cover the liquidated damages that we agreed upon. So what am I going to sue her for?
You can't sue her.
I'm going to waste money
Yeah.
as the seller. I'm going to take time away from work. If I have a job, I got to possibly, I'm going to have to go to the courthouse. It's going to be more than likely, it's going to be a small claims case, right? It's going to be less than 10 grand. What am I going to sue her for $30,000 because she chose not to make a deposit? Come on, man. Right? It just doesn't work that way. So let's just specify that. 2 minutes. Occupancy. Oh, we talked about this already, right? We're talking about which was the TOPA. Condominium plan development and disclosures. This agreement is as specified in paragraph, contingent upon buyer's review and approval of common interest disclosure. So it's simply adding or clarifying that the buyer has to agree to them, right? The same way that if I provide a TDS or an SPQ or an AVIC to Brandon as the buyer, Brandon reviews it, he says that the seller filed an insurance claim in 2021 because he had a busted pipe upstairs, and Brandon is not happy. Does that allow Brandon to pull out of the contract?
Yes.
Yes, 100%. That's why the 17-day contingency period is there, and there is a contingency that says review of seller documents. Guess what? Condominium plan disclosures. If we go back up, it says here, common interest disclosures. It's already set in stone in the contract, right? So it's just clarifying what that means. Let's do one more and then we'll call it a day. Well, and we'll continue on these, on the rest of it next week, because there's, again, you guys gotta read it. Remove a contingency cancellation for any contingency specified in paragraph 3L or 8, which are the contingencies we were just seeing, or elsewhere. What does this mean? Remember, there is an insurance contingency integrated into this contract now that is not specified in the grid. Right? So, what is that insurance contingency for? Brandon is my buyer. He's buying a house, we get the NHD. NHD says that the property's in a flood zone. What kind of insurance does Brandon need now? Flood insurance. He goes to get a quote for flood insurance, and the quote is like, holy crap, this is crazy. This is expensive. Well, the new insurance contingency allows Brandon to pull out. Right? Because the insurance is just too expensive for this property. That protects him.
If you are within those 17 days.
Yes, 100%. 17 days. It's always going to be a 17-day contingency period on all contingencies. On all contingencies. Any questions?
George, what part of that, what you just said, the insurance contingency?
It is number 12.
Oh, is it in the matrix?
Yep. So it is right here. So it's page 9 of the RPA.
Okay.
Last question,
Okay, Daniela.
me.
And you got no more questions till next week, all right?
The 3 days and or 17 days or anything doesn't specify business or not business days.
It's always going to be it's always going to be calendar days.
Calendar days.
100%.
So, for example, if you open escrow Friday,
The weekend counts.
so when would you deposit the 5,000?
Now that's different. You're talking. That's not the deposit is not a contingency.
Okay.
Okay.
The
So the contingencies are different,
Okay.
right? The deposit is due within 3 days of the earliest day open, right? So if you get an offer accepted on Saturday, let's say that's day 0, right? When is the deposit due? 3 days after you get the offer or the contract executed. What does executed mean? Right? That all parties have signed. So because in that sense, because it's the next operating day, the deposit is due when?
Monday.
Wednesday. Wednesday, because it starts on, you would have to be, I mean, escrow's not open on the weekends. So it's the next operating day, which would be what? Whatever day they open, depending on what company they're gonna be choosing. If Monday is what do we have on Monday? We have a holiday, right? So that would give you an extra day, because the holidays are actually integrated into the contract as well as a new contingency. And we'll go over that next week. All right, guys.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you, George.
George, do you have like a